Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, the Superior Court in California rules on immigration truckers' rights. We have the details on what it means and the Sikh community's reaction. And we've talked a lot about how Sikh issues have now lit up the mainstream news in Canada. Well, in the United States, a congressional briefing has been called today in Washington to discuss India's transnational repression threat to US security. Is the threat now at last being taken seriously by North America? And as we look forward to the latest iteration of the Khalistan referendum in Seattle, this event has been dedicated to a particular hero of the Khalistan movement, a Shaheed whose story fires the very blood in our veins. Well, details of his story and indeed a fascinating video of Bhindrinwale Ji giving his opinion on Iran coming up in a moment. All this and more on today's show, and of course at the end of the show we'll take a look at loads of your great comments which have come in beneath the video, so thank you as always for those. Right, got a lot to get through this morning, and I will start of course with this trucking story. It is a story that sits at the very heart of the Sikh community, particularly in California. And gosh, oh, beg your pardon, I've got the wrong story up there. I'll come back to that in a moment. Here we go. Right, so now for decades, Sikh truckers have been very much, I would say, the unsung heroes of the United States supply chain, with some estimates suggesting that nearly 40% of all drivers on the West Coast particularly are from the Sikh community. But of course, lately, that immigrant dream has felt more like a bit of a target because, of course, sadly, an awful lot has happened over the last sort of year or two in this industry. And it particularly refers really to a bit of a dark cloud that's hung over the industry after two very serious tragedies. Of course, in August last year, a crash on the Florida Turnpike involving a driver called Harjinder Singh resulted in 3 fatalities after his his U-turn, that awful video that went viral about it. And then shortly after that, there was this second horrific incident in Ontario, California, where another young driver, Jasonpreet Singh, was involved in an 8-vehicle pileup that claimed 3 more lives. So, of course, terrible tragedies. But what followed was a very quick and, I have to say, politically charged effort to demonise an entire workforce. And this took many forms. It was, of course, from English proficiency checks at way stations to the Trump administration's push for what's called the Delilah Law, which was named after a young girl injured in a 2024 accident. There has been I would say, a pretty concerted effort to link immigration status directly to road safety. Again, it's a ridiculous link, but that essentially is what's happened. Now, the Department of Transportation even moved to strip nearly 20,000 drivers of their CDLs, their licenses, based on what they called clerical issues regarding non-domiciled CDLs, commercial driver's licenses. And as a result of this, of course, organisations from the Sikh community have united to really fight back, and they launched this legal case. Well, yesterday, in fact 2 days ago, beg your pardon, the Superior Court of California, County of Alameda, ordered the California Department of Motor Vehicles, the CADMV, to allow 20,000 immigrant truckers to reapply for CDLs and to reissue those CDLs within a reasonable time. Now, the court's decision doesn't provide a precise timeline for the DMV to issue corrected CDLs. And unless the DMV does move quickly, these drivers are going to lose their ability to do their jobs tomorrow, March the 6th. So after Friday, after tomorrow, drivers with a cancelled CDL stand to lose, obviously, not all of their income, but also potentially their whole occupation if the Californian state doesn't create a more permanent solution. Now, this decision does, of course, come in response to this class action lawsuit that was launched in December by the Sikh Coalition in partnership with the Asian Law Caucus and a group of attorneys called Veal, Gottschall and Manges LLP, if I pronounce their names correctly. Anyway, that was on behalf, obviously, of a class of commercial drivers and the Jakara movement. The pool of affected drivers in this case includes a load of truckers from all sorts of different genres or parts of the trucking industry. That includes, obviously, truckers themselves, transit drivers and municipal workers. Their immigration statuses include DACA recipients, temporary protected status holders, asylum seekers, and others who have met state and federal requirements in order to operate commercial vehicles. And it was this ridiculous situation where their visa status, if their visa expired before the end of the expiry of their CDL, the commercial driver's license, they would lose their license, which is ridiculous because they are legitimate. They have a legitimate migrant status in the US, but because their visa expires before the end of their CDL is cancelled. So anyway, this case was launched to try and prevent that. So there was this sort of interim judgment has actually been a good thing, but it's added another problem, of course, one of timing. There's been a lot of reaction across the Sikh community, and in the Sikh coalition itself, the legal director has actually responded to say the court's ruling is a critical step towards economic security for immigrant drivers whose lives have obviously been upended by the erratic policy changes of the last several months. It also reaffirms a larger point, he says. This is Monmouth Court. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. She said it's Monmouth Court. It reaffirms a larger point that even in the face of federal pressure, state agencies cannot violate their statutory requirements to serve their constituents. Once the California DMV sends out the ordered notices and implements this new process, both immigrant communities and California as a whole will benefit from having these capable drivers on the road and keeping our economy moving. Now, one of the attorneys at the Asian Law Caucus, who was one of the partners in this legal case, a lady called Catherine Zhao, she said, this decision makes clear that California must fix its own error and create a process for commercial drivers to keep their licenses and livelihood. Still, drivers are unfairly burdened and unable to fully provide for their families as they wait for the state to outline how they may reapply, process applications, and reissue their licenses. Proceeding with license cancellations will punish tens of thousands of drivers who provide essential services in freight transportation, passenger transit, and municipal public works. The state must quickly find a permanent solution that doesn't leave our drivers and our economy paying the price when they did everything right. So again, despite winning this case, the trouble is now that the onus is on the Californian state to come up with a quick process to allow everything to fall into place. But at the moment, the process isn't there, and drivers are suddenly, as of tomorrow, going to be without a license. Anyway, and then finally, a quote from Deep Singh. He's the exec director at the Jakara movement itself. And he said, "We are encouraged with the court's decision and grateful that the judge recognised the urgent harm drivers are facing. But at the same time, we're disappointed that the DMV in California has not been required to provide immediate relief. The March 6th deadline puts tens of thousands of drivers in an incredibly difficult position, forcing them to navigate uncertainty and potential loss of driving privileges, while the state works out a process to reissue licenses without a hard timeline." So he's urged the DMV to automatically correct these licenses without requiring impacted drivers to reapply, repay fees, jump through bureaucratic hurdles. And as he says, the onus falls on the state to correct its own errors in order to prevent further harm to our immigrant communities. So basically, in a nutshell, they've won this case. The judge has said, look, common sense prevails. You've got to let them reapply for their licenses and grant these licenses. The problem now is one of simple bureaucracy, is that the California DMV has to quickly receive applications and turn them around by tomorrow, which obviously is just not possible. So again, we've got this sort of now this bureaucratic hurdle. So it's really up to the California DMV now to come out and say, okay, we'll find a very fast solution to this. So this tentative ruling, at least for now, from revoking those 20,000 licenses is a good thing. And the partnership, Sikh Coalition, Asian Law Caucus, did argue successfully that the state cannot simply pull the rug out from under these drivers without due process. But what does it actually mean? Well, the court recognised in this judgment that the state was essentially being bullied by federal threats to rescind California's licensing power if they didn't comply with the purge. And this is something that we brought out earlier on. We said, look, the California state doesn't want to do this, but it is being essentially bullied by the federal government into doing this. And so this has been endorsed, validated, confirmed by the judge in this case. And the ruling also highlights that the drivers were being targeted not for poor driving records or any lack of skill, but simply because of administrative and immigration status technicalities. And finally, the judgment also confirmed that removing 20,000 experienced drivers would have crippled the freight industry, which is already facing a massive shortage of qualified operators. Again, I've often talked, when we talked about this story, the supply chain is so essential to keeping basically the shelves full right across North America. You suddenly remove 20,000 drivers from that supply chain and people are going to say, why are my shelves empty? So again, it was potentially going to be a ridiculously self-harming decision, this whole thing. Anyway, so ultimately, to wrap this up, it is a significant win, but of course the battle isn't over. The final decision is actually expected in the next few days. The administration is still pushing for the Delilah Law to permanently bar non-citizens from commercial driving. So it is still very much the battle lines are drawn. But the lesson is very clear in this whole thing. The visibility of the community is its strength, but it also makes the community a very convenient scapegoat when tragedies like these sad two tragedies occur. So we've got to continue to demand that safety standards are indeed applied, but they're applied fairly to all drivers, regardless of where they're born or what's basically on their head. They're wearing a Death Star. It's about the quality of the driving. And this is why the Sikh community, the Sikh trucking industry itself, Sikh companies are behind enforcing better and improved laws to ensure the safety of the industry across the whole. But also, it cannot be about the status of the driver. So we'll keep an eye on this case and, we'll see what happens tomorrow. But fingers crossed, common sense will prevail. Right. I've talked a lot about, particularly recently, how Sikh issues have gone mainstream. And delighted to report, as of today, March the 5th, there's a big event happening. A congressional briefing is scheduled today. You can see the poster here announcing it. And this is being held in the heart of Washington, D.C. And it signifies a critical escalation in how US lawmakers are now addressing the issue of Indian government activities on American soil. So right in the very heart of Washington, D.C., we are now holding this important event right under the noses of Congress. Basically, you don't get more mainstream than this, because it has now moved to Capitol Hill itself. Now, it's all very well tracking the legal battles of truckers in California, but this happening in the very halls of power in Washington, D.C. at 12:30 lunchtime today, US time. Inside room 240 at the Cannon House office building. This is literally just steps away from the US Capitol. And this is a high-level briefing. It's titled Transnational Repression from India, Challenges for US National Security. Now, this is a very, very important title. And this title itself speaks volumes. It isn't just another community meeting. It is actually a strategic briefing aimed directly at US lawmakers and national security officials. And it's obviously coming at a really critical time. We've seen the reports from the FBI, particularly regarding indictments regarding the plot to assassinate Gurpratap Singh Pannu. Of course, this is happening in the shadow of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, just north of the border in Canada. And just this week, we've seen Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister Carney, under fire for appearing to downplay Indian interference while on his trade mission to India, only for his own intelligence agency, CSIS, to publicly correct the record, stating the threat assessment remains unchanged. So the background, the context, is absolutely unambiguous. India is up to no good right across North America. Canada knows it. The US knows it. And now this meeting is being held right in front of Capitol Hill to discuss really significant issues affecting the security of America. Now, this is why this meeting is particularly significant. It's how it's being framed. It is a national security framing. Look at the title. It's not being framed as a human rights issue alone. Of course, most of the meetings, discussions, protests, etc. tend to be framed around human rights. But this is framed around a challenge for US national security. Clever. Because this is now shifting the conversation from advocacy to policy. It's forcing the State Department and the DHS to look at India's actions as a direct violation of American sovereignty. And you can see now this shift, how important that shift is. It's not about human rights, we're the victims. It's a threat to you, to you, United States lawmakers, our nation's security, not just the Sikh community, but the whole security of the United States. So suddenly you can start to see how they're now welcoming into that umbrella of victimhood is the United States, not just we Sikhs in the Sikh community. All of us, all of you, we're all potential victims of India. It's a national security risk. So again, this reframing is very clever. It's subtle, but clever. And holding this in this venue, the Cannon House office building, means it's being hosted with the support of members of Congress. So you can start to see, again, how this is now dragging in key policymakers, key politicians into this. It's now providing a platform for victims and experts to present evidence of many things, which includes surveillance, harassment, hit lists, but of course directly to the people who write the laws, who create the policies. And again, I often talk about activism pressures up that political chain from grassroots all the way up to policymakers. It's the policymakers, the lawmakers at the top that need to know what they need to change policies about. And that grassroots pressure, exactly in this way, goes up this hierarchy. And here we have from grassroots activism has now created this meeting right in the very heart of Washington and actually now bringing in the lawmakers themselves into the very issues that we talk about daily. And this briefing follows the introduction, of course, of the Transnational Repression Policy Act. And that sits alongside several other bills that have been brought and promoted with an aim to create hotlines and training for local law enforcement, amongst many other things, to recognise when foreign governments, obviously India primarily, are targeting activists on US soil. But it is a sign that this sort of honeymoon period, let's call it, between Delhi and Washington is now being tested by these extrajudicial activities. So for years, many in the Sikh community really have felt like they were shouting to a deaf audience. They really honestly thought that their voices were never being heard, despite everything that's been going on, the threatening, the harassment, etc. But this meeting in Washington proves that this wind really has changed direction. Today, beg your pardon, I'm getting my dates wrong. It's today. The testimony shared in this meeting is very likely going to form the basis for more congressional hearings and potentially, of course, more sanctions or even diplomatic pressure on the Modi government. And it's a reminder, if indeed we need one, that while trade and geopolitics may well be important, they cannot come at the expense of the safety of American citizens. So we'll keep an eye on this meeting, and if there is any sort of press releases from this meeting, we'll obviously have a look at those and talk about those. But again, as I say, it's gone mainstream. This is really, really significant, and it is now involving the policymakers, congressmen, congresswomen themselves in meetings like this. So again, fantastic. Well done to the activists in the United States. This is where it leads. This is how things change. Right, and then let's move on to Seattle. Right, here we go. March the 22nd. This is a big day to look forward to. Excuse me whilst I have a mouthful of chai. The referendum, the next iteration of the referendum, as I reminded you yesterday, it is, of course, in Seattle on March the 22nd. Up there in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. Yes, the city of Seattle is going to host the next phase of the Sikhs for Justice Khalistan referendum. And, of course, everybody's out there already preparing. Let's have a look at this. Here's some of the team. part of the logistics to get the referendum underway. Fantastic, look at that. Fantastic, well done guys. And of course those big billboards are going up all around the whole area around Seattle. And of course this iteration of the referendum in Seattle follows massive turnouts that we've seen in other iterations of the referendum. Recently we were in San Francisco, over 127,000 cast their ballots in that one, and of course in the National Mall in Washington DC last August. But really, on this specific one, what makes a Seattle date particularly poignant is its dedication. Sikhs for Justice has specifically dedicated this phase of the referendum to one of the most key figures, towering figures in the history of the struggle for Khalistan. A gentleman called Shaheed Baba Gurbajan Singh Manochahal. Now, Baba Ji, as he was known, he wasn't just a soldier, he was a statesman. He was a real key member of the whole Khalistan movement, the sovereign movement. He was known as the Lion of Ratol. I hope I pronounced that right. So, when we look back through the history of the 1970s, 80s, 90s of Punjab, and in that Sikh struggle for sovereignty, there are very few names, really, when you look back through that history, who command as much respect and reverence as this gentleman, Baba Gurbajan Singh Manochahal. He's a figure of huge physical stature, but an even greater spiritual depth, as it turns out. He wasn't merely a militant commander, but he was what was known as a Sant Sipahi. That means a saint soldier, Sant Sipahi. And he embodied everything that the Khalsa stood for during that terrible period of the 80s, and post-1984 particularly. And to give you a little bit of his background, he was born in 1954 in the village of Manochahal in Amritsar. And he was raised in a family with a deep heritage of resisting injustice, typical Sikh family. His own granduncle had actually been martyred himself during the British Raj. Now his nickname, Baba, you'll come across this name as I've learnt myself as part of my educational journey. This salutation of Baba, it basically means, if I'm correct, and do correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding, it's like father or grandfather sort of figure. Baba, it's a name of respect, and he earned this name Baba. It was actually earned when he was young, and he was given it when he was defending schoolgirls from harassment. So it was, of course, a very early sign of his typical embedded protective spirit that would then later define his leadership. And he did actually, as it turned out, serve with distinction in the Indian Army's artillery regiment. His path, however, was irrevocably altered by the 1978 Sikh Nirankari clashes and the subsequent desecration of Sikh valleys. And he actually then became a close associate of the great man himself, over my shoulder, Sant Jarnail Singh Bhindrinwale Ji. And Bhindrinwale Ji recognised in this guy a future general. He recognised the qualities that this gentleman clearly had. So during Blue Star in 1984, that terrible June attack on the Golden Temple, interestingly, Bhindrinwale Ji, who ultimately gave his life in that terrible attack on the Golden Temple, Bhindrinwale Ji specifically ordered Manochahal to survive the assault for a very specific reason. He charged him with the duty of leading the struggle for Sampuran Prabhusata. That means complete sovereignty from the outside. And again, I hope I pronounced that right. Sampuran Prabhusata, which basically is Punjabi for complete sovereignty. So this is a really significant point, and this is why this guy was so important, Manat Chahal. As the Indian troops rounded on the Golden Temple in that terrible few days of June 1984, and Bhindrinwale Ji and his followers made their heroic last stand in the name of khalistan and in the name of Sikh freedom and human rights, he specifically ordered, and Manat Chahal must have hated this. If you put yourself in his place, he must have hated this order. But Bhindrinwale Ji said, look, you've got to survive this. You cannot die with us. You cannot lose your life. You cannot be martyred in this operation because we need you. We're going to die. And again, you can see the heroism just so embedded in this whole story. That Bhindrinwale Ji and his colleagues, they knew this was it. They knew they were about to meet Guruji themselves, giving their lives in the name of khalistan. But they said, look, this battle is just one battle in a war. We need to win this war. And you are going to be our general. When we die, we need you to carry this war forward, to take the war to India. So you must survive. So he did, obviously, survive that. He then went on to become the founder and chief of the Bhindrinwale Tiger Force of Khalistan, the BTFK. And Baba Manat Chahal became then, after that, a thorn in the absolute side of the Indian state for over a decade. And of course, his military training, don't forget, he served in the Indian military. And his training made him an absolute master of guerrilla warfare. And for example, on one famous occasion, when he was surrounded by security forces in a small hut, he tricked the police into handing him a flashlight, a torch, ostensibly to see a lock, only to use the light to aim his weapon and charge out, breaking the siege and escaping out into the fields of Majar. But beyond the battlefield, of course, Manat Chahal's significance lay primarily in his political and religious authority. So following that famous Sabat Khalsa of 1986, again, that's something we've covered in detail. So that great Sabat Khalsa, that great political meeting in 1986, he was then appointed the Jatadar of the Akal Takht, the highest seat of Sikhi. So he became the chief, the leader of the Akal Takht, after that Sabat Khalsa. And he then became a founding member of the Panthic Committee. Now, unlike some who viewed the struggle purely through a military lens, the real differentiator about Manat Chahal was he was a pragmatist. He understood all that was going on. He understood the politics, and he understood, of course, the military effort that needed to be made, but he understood the practical elements of everything, and advocating for a political participation to gain international recognition for Khalistan. Again, it's all very well, and again, we talked a lot about how the Khalistan movement has taken many forms. Of course, in the 80s and the 90s, it was a very militant force. It had to be. It was self-defense because they were being murdered by the tens of thousands by the Indian state. But they realised, and particularly characters like Manat Chahal realised, we cannot win this through military efforts. The Indian state is too big. We can't defeat them. We need to look at it from a political perspective. And of course, we need to widen the scope of this to a global stage. We need to get international recognition behind this. And this is why he was so important, so fundamental in this battle. And he stated the movement, quote, needed to wrest political power to shed the label of killers that they were being labelled with. Again, we often, even today, ironically, even the Indian state saying the Khalistan extremists, terrorists. He said, no, we need to lose that. We need to stop being associated with these sorts of labels. And we need to emerge as legitimate political representatives of a new nation of Khalistan. So again, this guy was years ahead of his time. He understood the only way for Khalistan to genuinely happen is we've got to do it through democratic processes, through political processes. So he was on it. He knew that he knew what it took to bring about Khalistan, which is why obviously then Sikhs for Justice recognised the importance of Manat Chahal and his own strategy. Now, by the early 1990s, Manat Chahal himself, he was the last major resistance leader still standing. Again, what a heroic figure. He was almost literally the last man standing in this battle against the Indian state, to such an extent that the Indian government placed a 25 lakh bounty on his head. That's roughly about $27,000 today, put him on his head. That's a huge amount of money in that time. This is back in 1993. And it really gave a clue just how much the Indian state were terrified of him, because he really was shaking the very foundations of the Indian state. This is how powerful and effective he was. And the Indian military conducted over 60 simultaneous, if I say military, it's also the police force. So you got this combined might of the Indian state trying to get this guy. They conducted over 60 simultaneous raids to try and capture him. And despite the huge pressure and the tragic execution of his father and brothers by the police, so pretty much all the male members of his family were murdered by the police, he still refused to flee or surrender, because of course there was a very simple pathway to escape across the border into Pakistan, as many did. Oh no, actually that's a disrespectful statement. Not many did, a few did. But ultimately there was an open door for him to escape and to flee with his life across the border to Pakistan, but he refused to. And sadly his end came on February the 28th, 1993. February the 28th, it was only a few days ago, the anniversary. Again, another sad anniversary. So his martyrdom came in 1993, February the 28th, in the village of Ratul, the Lion of Ratul. Reports suggest he was sadly betrayed by those around him, allegedly being poisoned before the final encounter, just to make sure he was not able to fight back with his usual ferocity. And even then, he still went down with his weapons in hand, choosing death over the humiliation of being captured and imprisoned. And again, it has resonance of Bhindrinwale Ji and his heroic final stand. Of course, the Lion of Ratul had a heroic final stand, despite allegedly being betrayed. And of course, today, Baba Gurpachan Singh Manachahal is remembered as the guardian of Khalistan. His life serves as a bridge between the spiritual mission of the Damdani Taxel and the political aspirations of the Sikh diaspora. And of course, by dedicating, as Sikhs for Justice have dedicated the Seattle referendum to his memory, the movement is now basically reaffirming that the flame of sovereignty that Manachahal kept alive through those terrible dark days of the 1990s, he's ensured that that flame continues to burn brightly today. So again, it brings goosebumps on the arms, stories like this. These heroic figures during those terrible times. And you can imagine, in fact, you probably can't imagine how awful it must have been for these families in the Punjab. I mean, sadly, there's still families still alive today who will remember those times. But for people like myself, it's almost unimaginable the life that these guys must have led, knowing that the Indian state, with its hundreds of thousands of law enforcement officers, soldiers hunting you down, trying to murder you, your family, as indeed they did. And yet it was heroes like this that stood up to that, again, against overwhelming odds. They managed to stand up to the Indian state, and their message resonates all the way through to 2026. It is heroes like this, their martyrdom, that has allowed the community even today to stand up with its head held high, saying we carry with us a rich heritage of martyrs who gave their lives, including Bhindrinwale Ji, for the cause that we are fighting today. So we have a moral and ethical duty and responsibility to carry the Khalistan movement forward, to deliver Khalistan, because heroes like this gave their lives so that we can carry on the fight today. So, of course, one of those heroes of this fight, and we often sort of chuckle at his rhetoric, but Gurpachan Singh Pannoon, it doesn't matter, how much you laugh at his rhetoric. This guy has been very much a hero himself, a democratic hero, following the rule of law, fighting this war that Manachahal himself had to fight back in the 90s and the 80s. Is that Gurpachan Singh Pannoon is carrying on that war, but in the right strategy these days that Manachahal recognised even back then. We need to fight this politically. And I want to play you, this is Gurpachan Singh Pannoon's latest video talking about this. Have a look at this.
Waheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji ki Fateh. Mr. President Trump, today in Seattle, pro-Khalistan Sikhs who are facing existential threat under Modi regime and who are seeking to liberate Indian-occupied Punjab, held a Khalistan freedom rally and have requested you to take a decisive action just the way you took it today, and also issue a decisive statement for the freedom of people of Punjab the way you stated for the people of Iran.
When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations. This is the moment for action. Do not let it pass.
Mr. President Trump, you rightly stated in your message, no American president has taken decisive actions the way you are taking. People of Punjab who are facing existential threat under successive Indian regimes are seeking your leadership. Mr. President, they have all their eyes on you, that you issue this statement of freedom for the people of Punjab so that they will have a separate Sikh homeland, Khalistan. Also, 28th February has a great significance in Sikh history. In 1993, Shaheed Gurbachan Singh Manocha, the George Washington of Khalistan movement and the pioneer of Khalistan Referendum, fought fearlessly and attained Shaheedi. What Sikhs for Justice is doing a global Khalistan referendum to liberate Punjab from the Indian occupation. Mr. President, the next Khalistan referendum will be held in Seattle on 22nd March with a very clear message. Sikhs for Justice is seeking a peaceful and democratic resolution to a contentious issue of Punjab, which is a ticking bomb. People of Punjab are seeking your guidance and your leadership, that you will stand with them to liberate Punjab from the Indian occupation, and once Punjab is liberated, that will be the greatest ally of America in South Asia. And American soldiers, they will never have to put their foot on the ground once Punjab is liberated from the Indian occupation, and 22nd March will lay the foundation of that groundwork by having a Khalistan referendum in Seattle.
Yeah, I mean, the message is very clear from Gurpratap Singh Pannu, and the strategy is very, very clear, using the democratic process of a referendum to internationalise the demand for a sovereign Sikh state. And by dedicating this vote to Baba Gurpratap Singh Manocha, Sikhs for Justice is bridging this gap between the armed resistance of the 80s and 90s and the diplomatic ballot-driven movement of today. It is a very clear message of continuity, that the goal remains the same, and even if the methods have evolved. And again, we've talked about how it has had to evolve from the militant resistance of those years through to the most effective method, which is today's democratic, peaceful means. Now, Washington State has a rapidly growing and politically active Sikh population. Seattle basically is a strategic hub. We've seen local Gurdwaras and youth groups becoming increasingly engaged in civil rights and advocacy. And I often talk about grassroots activism, how important it is. Well, this referendum is expected to draw people right across the West Coast and potentially down from Canada as well. So this March the 22nd referendum is more than just a simple vote. It is basically, and because he's dedicated it to this great man, Singh Manocha, it is a tribute to the sacrifices made by Manocha and many like him who gave their lives so that this dream of Khalistan would never fade. And you have to say, whether the Modi government likes it or not, the diaspora is proving this movement is not a fringe element. It is a deeply rooted aspiration that will never go away. And more importantly, it's not just not going away, it is gaining momentum. It is growing in strength. It is growing in popularity. So, of course, if you are there, if you're in the Seattle area, or even if you have to travel from Vancouver, California, March the 22nd is the day to make your voice heard. We must absolutely tell the world that Khalistan is coming, and that support from the community, the spirit of the Khalsa, is as strong today as it was back in the days of Mana Chahal's BTFK. So, make sure you cast your vote. And linking this, of course, the story of Mana Chahal with the great man sitting over my shoulder, watching things unfold. Bhindrinwale Ji, of course. Thank you again. I think it was Stay Safe on our comments column showed me sent a link to one of his interviews with an American journalist. I'm going to show you this interview in a moment, and particularly in the context of the Seattle referendum on March the 22nd, and particularly again because it was dedicated to Shaheed Baba Gurchand Singh Mana Chahal. It's essential to understand the ideological foundations that they both stood for. Now, Mana Chahal didn't just appear out of nowhere. He didn't just appear from some sort of vacuum. He was a product of a vision set out by Sant Janal Singh Bhindrinwale. And there is this rare and powerful piece of archival footage that really does capture this. It is an interview where Sant Ji is asked about the very nature of the Sikh struggle, whether it is religious or political. Because, of course, there are those sorts of distinctions that we outside the Sikh community always say, well, is it a religious struggle? Is it a political struggle? We do actually find, as a non-Sikh, it's quite hard to sort of marry those two together. But if you're a Sikh, of course, it's almost embedded in Sikhi, this religious miri piri sort of concept. It's the same in other religions, actually. Islam is a little bit the same. Again, they sort of tend to tie their politics in with their religious beliefs. But certainly it is very particular to the Sikh struggle. And Bhindrinwale Ji is even compared, actually, in this video to a figure who at that time had just shaken the global order. He, known as Ayatollah Khomeini of Iran. Yes, it's very pertinent, this, with prevailing situation in Iran. And as I show this video, do pay attention to the reporter's comparison of Bhindrinwale to an Ayatollah, and his response regarding the slavery around the necks of the Sikhs. So here it is. This is this fascinating video back in, I think it was 1983. It was filmed. So it was a year before Operation Blue Star.
Militants are a minority. The Golden Temple is sacred to all Sikhs, and if government should move against the temple by force, most Sikhs would become militants. That was the fear that kept the Indian government indecisive until June. But this man always knew he was in danger. He was right. He died early in the fight. He had been in the temple for 2 years, under security within security. But he was always accessible to his followers. The nearest thing the Sikh rebellion had to an Ayatollah Khomeini. Jarnail Singh Bhindrinwale, 38 when he was killed. If he had been an American pastor, he would have been a fundamentalist. He hated the successful urban Sikhs who trim their beards and wear two-piece suits. The poor and the illiterate loved him, brought him what rupees they could spare. He spoke openly of the deaths and violence his followers had caused. These were not murders, he said, but justice. And if necessary, the Sikhs would set up their own state, and, the government feared, start the disintegration of India as a federal nation. We found him at a midday audience. You want to talk, he said, sit down and we'll talk. The camera and I had become part of the show. If I were to tell Americans, very briefly, what you want, what should I say? What do you want?
ਜੇ ਮੈਂ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ ਸੰਖੇਪ ਲਫ਼ਜ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੇ ਕੀ ਕਵਾਂ ਮੈਂ
We want, said the priest, to bring an end to the slavery which has been put around the necks of the Sikhs. Some people, even some Sikhs, say that this is not a religious movement but a political movement. Is that partly true?
ਕਈ ਲੋਕ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਲਹਿਰ ਆ ਸੰਘਰਸ਼ ਆ ਇਹ ਧਾਰਮਿਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਰਾਜਨੀਤਿਕ ਆ ਕੀ ਇਹ ਠੀਕ ਆ
ਮੈਂ ਝੂਠ ਹੈ
Bhindrinwale said that observation was totally wrong for a paradoxical reason. In Sikhism, he said, religion and politics are inseparable from each other.
Do you see any comparison at all between yourself and Khomeini?
ਜੀ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਲੋਕ ਸੋਚਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਨਵੇਂ ਖਮੇਨੀ ਬਣੋਗੇ
ਨਹੀਂ ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਗੁਰੂ
He either misunderstood or hedged. He couldn't be a Khomeini, he said, because he is a Sikh and a servant of the Sikhs. And in Sikhism, he said, nothing is irrational. A Sikh is never an oppressor, but only defends himself and his people. I have never, he said, initiated any attack with my tongue or my pen or with my sword. I only answer back or retaliate, he said, to actions initiated by the enemies of the Sikhs.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And again, just in the context of those sort of final words, he basically said, "I only ever act defensively," and it often brings to mind sort of the irritating criticisms I see across social media from Hindutva people who say, "Oh, this terrorist Bhindrinwale." You know, just by definition, he wasn't a terrorist. By his own admission, I don't attack, I defend. My actions are only ever defensive. But that interview itself is a masterclass in basically Sikh philosophy. So when that reporter asked if the movement is religious or political, his answer is definitive. In Sikhism, the two are inseparable. And of course, this, as I said earlier, this is the concept of miri piri, this balance of temporal and spiritual power. Now, interestingly, of course, so this very pertinent link to Iran and the Ayatollah Khomeini. The reporter's comparison to Ayatollah Khomeini is actually quite fascinating. So the two movements were, of course, vastly different. But the Western media in the early 80s, when this was, they saw a parallel. It was a grassroots, faith-based uprising challenging a secular, centralised state. So just as Ayatollah Khomeini transformed Iran, Sant Ji was transforming the Sikh psyche from one of slavery to one of sovereignty. So hence why he was sort of trying to draw a comparison to Ayatollah Khomeini. Now, when it comes to the Manachahal story, this is basically exactly where Baba Gurpchand Singh Manachahal fits in. He took Sant Ji's words about never initiating an attack, but always retaliating against enemies. And he basically turned those words into a decade-long resistance. He understood that the slavery that Bhindrinwale Ji was talking about wasn't just physical, but it took many forms, whether administrative and, of course, politically. That's what Manachahal understood. So, when we look today in Seattle, of course, that same struggle continues. But as we saw with Gurpchand Singh Panun's video earlier, this retaliation is, of course, no longer physical. It's no longer violent with the sword. But, of course, it is with a ballot. It's ballots, not bullets, as Gurpchand always likes to recount. So the referendum is basically the modern-day expression of Sant Ji's demand to bring an end to the slavery around the necks of Sikhs. So when we see at these referendum, these wonderful iterations of the referendum, when we see these long lines of wonderful, beautiful khalistan flags and the families all there smiling, happy, enthusiastic, we're not just seeing a simple political vote. We're actually seeing the fulfillment of a vision that Bhindrinwale Ji himself articulated in that small room in the 1980s, and that Baba Manachahal died himself defending in the fields of Punjab. And the world tried to label them, and still today tries to label them as fundamentalists or militants or terrorists. But for us, for the community, they were the architects of a nation's dignity. So it's so important, everybody who can, go to Seattle, show the world that this quest for Khalistan isn't just a chapter in history. It is a living, breathing reality. It is coming. We know it's coming. The momentum's building. The support is there. It comes from a huge history of Shaheeds, heroes who gave the ultimate price so that we today can continue this battle and get this battle for Khalistan over the line. We're nearly there. It is coming. India knows it. India is terrified. It knows it's coming. It's getting increasingly desperate. The diaspora knows it's coming. We all know it's coming. I sit here on a daily basis telling it it's coming. But it's only going to come if we continue this fight. We mustn't. Now we're nearing the finish line. You don't give up. You don't fall to your knees. We have to continue the fight. So get to Seattle, cast your vote, keep the activism going, keep the Khalistan flags flying. It is happening. And it is a glorious day that's coming. And as James and I used to say when James was with me, we look forward to that day when we can broadcast a show on the day of Sikh sovereignty, the day that Khalistan is founded, and it's coming. I look forward to that day. So, on that note, let's move on to our comments column. Thank you, as always, to our wonderful audience for your contributions. Today, kicked off with Punjab. Thank you, Punjab. And you said the mother of all democracy. Actually, before I make a comment, that this video had a terrible viewing figures. And again, I don't know if it was shadow banned. I actually suspect it's because I think the thumbnail was not a great thumbnail. I thought it was hilarious. Clearly, a lot of people didn't understand it. It was a pun on axis of evil. And for those who might not know what a weevil is a tiny, dirty little insect that gets into food and destroys food. In other words, it's a horrible thing. So it was a pun on axis of evil, axis of weevils. Clearly, that fell on deaf ears, sadly. So my apologies. Anyway, but I just wanted to raise that point. And again, this just shows the difficulty of YouTube. You've got to get the thumbnails absolutely right. Otherwise, videos, really important videos like this there's some big stories in the video, which is what's frustrating. A lot of people didn't see those stories that they needed to see it because basically the failure of a thumbnail. Frustrating. Anyway, thank you, Punjab. Sorry to interrupt your comment, Punjab. What you said, the mother of all democracies and the oldest democracy collaborating to basically suppress the Khalistan movement. But it's been going on ever since Maggie Thatcher. You're absolutely right. I mean, we know. I mean, God, the British establishment, we know, Punjab, the British establishment has been in bed with the Indian establishment since 1947. The ruling elite of the British Empire handed the reins, the colonial power, over to the colonial new power of India, the Brahmins, the ruling elite of India. So it was one small ruling elite handed the colony of India over to the next ruling elite, the Brahmins. Absolutely they did. Maggie Thatcher sent SAS officers, allegedly, to blurt the Ackle Tact. We don't know, but this is why we're campaigning for this wretched 1984 inquiry to find out what did the British government do in 1984. Was the SAS involved in that attack on the Golden Temple? I suspect not directly, because if they had been, it would have been over in a matter of hours rather than days. And ironically, according to sources, they believe the SAS did provide consultation advice to the Indian government, and they actually said what you need to do is a surgical strike. Get in there, get Bhindrinwale out, or the key core, get them out. And what did India do? Now we know better. We'll just line a load of tanks up and just blast the Ackle Tact to pieces. Yeah, what a great success that was. It managed essentially to generate the whole Khalistan movement, and also at the same time insult every Sikh across the planet, and actually I have to say probably insult anybody of any decent ethical morality. But anyway, that's another story. But yes, you're absolutely right in your comment. Do you think Starmer doesn't know what's happening in Punjab? Actually, okay, you say, of course he knows, but he doesn't care. He only cares about trade deals. I hate to say it, I disagree. I don't think Starmer does know what's happening in Punjab. I think the man is completely bloody clueless, to be perfectly honest. And I think he's got so many failures on his plate at the moment. I think the Punjab is the last thing on his mind. A free trade deal, yeah, he wants that. But I would never give him the credit of intelligence, Starmer. You know my feelings about Keir Starmer. I'm not going to bore you with them again. Thank you, Punjab, for your comment. S. Baines. Yes, now we're talking about India as a failing state. And the UK has become a vassal of India. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. But as you say, the economics of India, watch my podcast this weekend if you want to know more about the failing economics of India and the corruption going on at the highest level, where the Indian state is essentially siphoning off the wealth of India Not to the British Empire, but to the rising oligarchs, the billionaires, the Ambanis of the world. Watch my podcast tomorrow about that. Anyway, but as you say, there is no $3 trillion market. The per capita GDP of India is $2,200. But actually, again, it's all smoke and mirrors. The stated, publicised GDP of India is a lot less than the reality, as has been discovered. India will pivot to Russia for oil. We talk about the geopolitics here. We are trying to seduce India to align with the West, but ultimately it's likely that, again, it's pivoting back to Russia. That's the worst thing that could happen for us. We don't want that. And we talk about free trade deals, but you're saying, how can free trade deals be signed with India and Western nations like the US? Free trade deals are signed by nations of equal stature, as you say. India isn't of equal stature. India's economy is on its knees. It will never admit it until it absolutely has to. But India is in trouble. But more importantly, as your point comes to make, is that desperate India is floundering, trying to keep this artificial country together, as indeed artificially created by the British. The geopolitical winds are going against India. Let's keep the pressure on. That is important. As I said earlier, the Khalistan movement is gaining momentum. It's winning. India knows it. It's getting increasingly desperate. The more we keep this pressure on, the more desperate they're going to become. But the more desperate they become, the more evident it is to the Western world that India is a smoke and mirrors state. It is an artificial state that is basically built on sand, not solid foundations. And that's when the cracks appear and Khalistan then rises up. One of my shorts, lots of comments. Carney came in, unsurprisingly, for a bit of grief, and deservedly so. Cam K says, Hindutva fanatics must be stopped from working against humanity. Absolutely, they must be. And well done to various organisations, including the French organisation Sciences Po, in association with the Caravan, who came up with that wonderful website that actually details the network of Hindutva right across the globe. Do have a look online if you want to know if you've got a local Hindutva affiliate in your town. It's a brilliant website. The Caravan in association with Sciences Po. Anyway, Google it. I'm sure you'll be able to find it. Have a look at that. We must stop them in their tracks. The first part of that is to identify who they are, because, of course, they are hidden in plain sight. My Google says, thanks for exposing this liberal Mark Carney who refuses to protect the legal minorities. Remember, on election day, exactly, when it comes to cast your ballot at the next election, remember those who betray you. Don't vote for them, obviously. Mustang Singh Dulai. Carney doesn't care about Sikh lives anymore. I don't think it's about anymore. I don't think he ever did. Bobby Singh. Carney's on the RSS payroll. I won't use that rude word, but yes. Or actually, I could reinterpret. I know what you're trying to say, but I'll say busted instead. Yes, we've busted him. We know. We've sussed him out. We know. Jagtar Sidhu. Modi is the killer of innocent Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, and minorities. The butcher of Gujarat. You don't get a name like the butcher of Gujarat for nothing, do you? And he's the Prime Minister of India. A man who, as you rightly say, is responsible for the murder, the mass murder of thousands of innocent Muslims, Sikhs, Christians in Manipur, etc. Any minorities. How much blood is on Modi's hands? It is astounding, isn't it? And you continue to say, the great man himself, Sant Bhindrinwale Ji, the saint soldier of the Guru Sahib, the greatest Gursikh of Guru Sahib, Shaheed is the noblest cause in Sikhism. Their names are shining like a star in world history. Compare that to Modi, the killer of innocence. Absolutely. So we know who our heroes are. Our hero certainly is not Narendra Modi. He represents everything that we need to fight against, democratically fight against, peacefully fight against. And that is why we are winning the war. The heroes of the 80s and the 90s, the Shaheeds like Bhindrinwale Ji, like Mona Chahal Ji, these guys laid their lives down so that we today can continue this fight democratically. We know we're the good guys. We know who are the bad guys in this. It's very simple. It really is that black and white. And this is why we will win. The truth always prevails. The good always win in the end. History always proves that. So we must stay the course. Sat Bachchan Singh. Respected truth teller, twins. Angus Scott, thank you. You're incredible, truthful to God's way to expose the evils of our present times. These inhuman-minded people claiming to be part of honest living human beings. Like I just said, don't worry, we're winning this battle. The good will defeat the evil. Just the way of the world. The truth will prevail. We're getting there. Don't worry. Have faith. Suki, Kurai. Well done, Angus. You're doing a good job. Well, I'm just doing my job. Just doing my little bit. Thank you. But as I keep saying, I can only do this with you guys. We are a united force. This is why the Khalistan movement is winning, because our individual voices are uniting behind that beautiful yellow banner of Khalistan. Amrik Singh and Jaskarat Singh. Khalistan is on its way forward. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ka Fateh, Waheguru Ji Chadi Kala. Khalistan Zindabad. Well, I couldn't put it better myself. Indeed, Khalistan Zindabad. That's it for another week. But the battle marches on. Khalistan is coming. Let me know your thoughts. Don't forget, get your travel plans in place for Seattle. Get there. Get your vote casted. Don't forget to bring your flag. Stick your Khalistan flag stickers everywhere. Talk to people. Get the word out. Tell people about the wonderful concept of Khalistan, what it means. Because it's coming. You know, we see the sun is rising over Punjab. Good days ahead. Anyway, that's it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. That's it for another week indeed. Another week passes. Thank you for all your support. Do keep the comments coming. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your perspectives. Send me links to stories that you think I should be covering, or interesting videos, as many of you have indeed been doing. Thank you for those. Do keep them coming. I do read every single email. Email me directly at message@sutlejtv.com. But thank you. That's it for another week. Keep the support coming. Have a great weekend. Live in Chadi Kala and Khalistan Zindabad.